So you're thinking about moving to Jacksonville, or you've already made that decision. I am moving to Jacksonville, Florida, and now you're doing your research. You're trying to figure out how much does it cost to live in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, in this video, we are going to give you all those hidden costs. You can go to a bunch of different websites and look at averages and look at this and look at that. We are going to give you the actual hidden costs, like what does it feel like each month? What are you paying out of your paycheck each month to live in Jacksonville, Florida? Those major expenses that you're not going to find on those other websites. And again, stick with this to the end. We're going to show you what some of those smaller costs on a daily basis look like, your groceries and stuff like that. So we're not going to wait around any longer. We're going to jump into it right now. All right, so the biggest hidden cost that we find here in the Jacksonville area, that thing that gives people sticker shock when they move here, the number one thing is hazard insurance. Now, why is hazard insurance, or some people call it homeowner's insurance? Why is it so stinking expensive here in Florida? One thing that I've noticed is that Florida is not the only state that's experiencing this right now. Parts of Texas, all of California, other states that have a tendency to have natural disasters are facing a hazard insurance or homeowner's insurance crisis. The one thing that sets Florida apart is that we tend to be a very litigious state when it comes to our insurance practices. If you take a look at this stat right now, it shows that Florida accounts for about 9% of all the claims in the United States. So you think, okay, that's not too bad. 9%, of all the states out there, Florida's not, a monopoly on insurance claims. But the interesting thing is that 79% of all litigation against insurance companies comes from the state of Florida. So the state over the last couple of years has been going through trying to figure this out. So trying to make it a better place for not only insurers to operate, but also to provide the protections that the consumers need. So over the next couple of years, I think what you're going to see are these changes that have been enacted or been put in place. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to catch up. But we're really excited because now, over the last few years, we've seen more and more carriers leave the state of Florida, which reduces the competition, which makes the costs go up. We're seeing more carriers now start to come back in. So as we see those carriers come back in, you'll see that competition go up and you'll start to see that pricing come down. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, take a look at this right here. This is my insurance bill from 2019. So we wrote a check, it was $1,185. Okay. We didn't really do anything to the house, anything different. Okay. We just $1,185. That was about what we were paying every single year. Now, fast forward where we are to today. Okay, we just at the end of 2022, we had to write our bill for 2023, all of 2023. And if you take a look at it, our payment now is $3,282 for the exact same house with no additional coverage. That's what the insurance reform is aimed at trying to curb, is that huge increase in hazard insurance. So that's why you guys want to give us a call. Our contact information is right down below. That's why you want to give us a call as early as you can, so that way we're not stuck or we're not shocked when we get to the closing table on how much that insurance cost is going to be. All right, so is the litigation the only reason why insurance claims have gone up? Nah, not really. There are two other reasons why we have seen our insurance costs go up, not just the litigation, but we've had 6 hurricanes that have come through the state of Florida over the last, since about 2015, so over the last 8 years, so about one a year that we've had that's caused damage. The other thing is that we are in Florida, we have some temperamental weather, so we'll have these days where we have some hail that comes and you get some hail damage, and there are a number of companies out there that have gone through and looked at houses and identified that there was storm damage or hail damage to the roofs, and so a lot of homeowners in Florida got brand new roofs under their hazard insurance program, their homeowners program. And again, because so many of them were doing it in such a short period of time, we did see a spike in that hazard insurance as a result of that. So again, the reason why you want to call us very early on, we want to get you partnered up with one of our hazard insurance experts, so that way they can tell you exactly how much you're going to be looking at for hazard insurance. And then once we find that right house, making sure that we've got the right insurance program for you to protect you, but also to save you as much money as we can. So if this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about buying and selling real estate here in the Jacksonville area, give us a call, send us a text, send us an email, book a private Zoom call. All of our contact information is right at the bottom. Hi, my name is Chris Snow with the Florida Coastal Team, and my team and I, we get calls, texts, and emails from folks just like you every single day looking for help moving to the Jacksonville area. We absolutely love it. So whether you're looking at moving in the next 2 days, the next 2 weeks, the next 2 months, just give us a call, send us a text, send us an email. Again, book that private Zoom call. All of our contact information is right at the bottom, and we'll help you make that smooth move here to the Jacksonville area. All right, so another one of those big hidden costs when it comes to living in Florida is that all of Florida is in a flood zone. We call it Flood Zone X, which means that at some point, the entire state of Florida was underneath water. Now, how do we know that? Well, I grew up in the center of the state. I mean, like literally in the center of the state. And we had this old pond that we would go and we'd fish at. And all around the pond, we would walk around and we would find shark's teeth, right? So we'd find these huge shark's teeth on this pond in the middle of the state of Florida. So how do we know that the entire state was underwater? Well, the only way that that part of Florida could ever have shark's teeth is if the entire state was underwater. So with that being said, all of Florida is in a flood zone. And the way FEMA does is they rank them based on what severity or what is the likelihood of a flood or a flood event occurring in that spot, in that location. And so sometimes what ends up happening is a buyer goes out, they find a property, they fall in love with it, they put a contract on it, and as they're going through the underwriting process, if they're taking a loan, they're going through that underwriting process, all of a sudden the lender says, hey, there's required flood insurance on this property and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And sometimes that makes it just enough where that buyer either cannot qualify for the loan to buy the property, or the buyer just looks at it and says, hey, I might be able to afford it. I just don't want to be living in a flood zone, or I don't want to pay that much for flood insurance. So that being said, how do we find out what the flood zones are? And then how do we find out, or how do we protect and find out if a property is actually in a flood zone or not? So let's do this. Let's jump into my computer and I'm going to show you real quick. So let me do my screen share and we're going to show you exactly what we do to help our buyers identify, what the flood zones are, and then also how to find whether a property is in a flood zone or not. All right, so let's take a look here. What we did was we pulled up the FEMA definitions for flood zones. So as you take right here, from the most severe to the least severe, they go in order here. So what we're looking for is anything that is in this flood zone X or C. Most of what we'll find in Florida is that a lot of the state is in flood zone X. Once we get a little bit closer to the ocean, which here in Jacksonville, our major flood zones that we're going to find are either A, AE, or V and VE. And so that being said is that we want to look and say, okay, if we're in one of those flood zones that are A, AE, V, or VE, we know that we're going to have to get flood insurance. So how do we find it? How do I prevent myself from falling in love with a house that's going to have to be, that's going to require flood insurance? Well, I'm going to jump into MLS and I'm going to show you exactly what we do to find that out. All right, so let's say we identified this is our perfect home. This house located over in Neptune Beach. This is not too far from the beach. It's within 1 mile of the beach. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, all right, this is close to the beach, so this is going to be in a flood zone. There is no way this is not going to be in a flood zone. So we're preparing our customer, hey, this might be in a flood zone, but let's take a look. So now what we're going to do, we found the house. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the map and show where this property is for the customer. And when I look at this, and I'm going to zoom out, and one thing that you notice here in Jacksonville, right? Here's the ocean. This is this big ocean area. So anything that is close to the ocean most likely is going to have some sort of flood insurance requirement or have a higher likelihood for flood insurance. The other thing you'll see, the intracoastal waterway has a tendency to flood. So what you're going to find is houses along the intracoastal waterway are going to be in a flood zone. The other as we zoom back out, the St. Johns River, as we look at this, the St. Johns River. So lots of waterways in the Jacksonville area. So lots of chances that those properties that are in and around those things, in and around those bodies of water are going to require flood insurance. So let's zoom back in. We found our house. We love it. It's right here in Neptune Beach. And I'm expecting that this is going to be smack dab in the middle of a flood zone, and I'm going to have to carry a huge flood policy. Well, one of the things that we do is we'll come in here and then we'll overlay the FEMA flood map. Now, one of the things that you saw right off the bat was anything that is in this brown area, you can see this. This is showing AE right here. That is that AE flood zone, which would be a required flood zone. Now, this particular property, not in a flood zone, right? It's less than a mile from the beach, and yet there's no flood zone designation in here. That is tremendous news for a homeowner that's going to purchase this property. And as you start to zoom out, you can see what those flood zones look like. We see the VE, that high rank, that there's a likelihood of flooding all along the coastline here. And then as we go over to the intracoastal waterway, we're seeing that AE zone. So the closer you are to those bodies of water, where those bodies of water will fill up and spill over into the housing areas, you'll find that you'll have those flood insurance or required flood insurance. But again, pretty interesting that where this house is located, there's lots of areas in the Jacksonville Beach area that are not considered in a flood zone. So how do we prevent and mitigate that? Right off the bat, as soon as we find a property that we want and like, we are going to look to see whether it's in a flood zone or not. And the interesting thing is if all of the house is in the flood zone, then you're going to be required to carry flood insurance. It'll be up to the lender, because sometimes what will end up happening, I'll see if I can find maybe a lot here, where on this particular home right here on the corner, a small portion of this lot is showing in the AE zone. But if the house is not touching that AE zone or touching that flood zone, it's up to the lender. But more times than not, they would not require flood insurance if only a portion of the lot is touching the flood zone, but the house and the structure itself are above that flood zone. So hopefully the lender will look at that and just make a common sense decision that, hey, no, the whole house or the structure is not there and wouldn't require that flood insurance. All right, I know what you're thinking here. You just watched all this information about flood insurance and required flood insurance, and you're sitting there thinking, this guy didn't even tell me how much that was going to be. So I'm going to be honest with you, I made a mistake. I was watching the playback, getting ready to make this live, and I'm like, man, I forgot to tell them what kind of pricing you can expect or what kind of price ranges are out there for flood insurance. So here it is. So I do apologize. Flood insurance on the low end, you're going to pay about $400 a year if you're in that flood zone X and it's not required flood insurance, but you want to get it anyway. It's going to run you about $400. If you're going to be in some of the most expensive flood zones, the ones that are the highest rated flood zones, you're going to pay up to about $4,000 a year. So it's going to range between $400 to about $4,000 a year. So again, depending on if you're right there on the ocean, you're going to see that bigger insurance policy, that bigger flood policy. But if you're more inland and you want to have just peace of mind and get flood insurance, it's not going to cost you that much, only a couple $100 a year. So there you have it. That's the price. And if you got more questions on flood insurance, again, one more reason to give us a call. All right. So now the big question we have is we're shopping for our hazard insurance before we find a house, right? So we get into town. We're starting to shop for that because we want to make sure that we budget that into there. We know that there might be a house that we find that we love that we might have to have some flood insurance. Now, what am I actually going to pay for a house? How much am I going to pay for a house in Jacksonville, Florida? All right, so let's do this. I'm going to jump in. I create these monthly market reports so that I can show you what's going on with the median prices, things that are going on in the market on a daily basis and on a monthly basis. So let's take a look at those right now. All right, so as we take a look at this, what am I going to get for my money? So the median sales price in Jacksonville, $330,000. Now, that's down about 3% from a year ago. But a median sale price, this is a little bit lower than the national average. So you get a lot of house for your money here in the Jacksonville area. And when we start breaking it out by condos versus townhouses versus single family homes, the single family homes are always going to be a little bit higher. They're going to price out a little bit higher. And then right below there, the townhouses will price out. And then just below there, the condominiums will be even more affordable. So if you can't hit that median price of the $330,000, that's okay. We have housing prices that go from $75,000 to $80,000 up to the multi-million here in the Jacksonville area. Just depends on where you need to be and how close you need to be to certain things. We'll find that right house for you. Now, what else is going on in the marketplace? Well, right now, the average days on market that you can see right here, 28 days before a house goes under contract. So when a house gets listed, if it does not sell in that first weekend, which a lot of houses do, it's most likely going to stay on the market for about 28 days before it actually sells. And sellers, in some cases, are getting over their asking price. Right now, about 18% of sellers are getting whatever their asking price is and then some. But there's a good majority of them, almost 80% of them, are going to get something less than their asking price. And right now, that average list to sale price is at 97.3%, which means that if you go in and you're looking at a $100,000 property, it's most likely going to sell for $97,300, 97.3% of its asking price. One last thing I want to point out on my report here are this month's supply of inventory. Right now, we are showing 2.1 months supply of inventory, which means that if not another new home goes on the market in the Jacksonville area in the next 2 months, we will have no houses for sale. That is a heavy seller's market. We should be at about 6 months supply, and a 6-month supply doesn't favor a buyer. It doesn't favor a seller. It kind of gives us that normalized market. So what we have right now is we still have a lot of low inventory that's going on. A lot of sellers sitting on the sideline. Buyers are kind of sitting on the sideline as well, but the ones that are out there, they're buying up whatever they can as quickly as possible because they don't want to get into another buying frenzy. One of the things that has actually led to a number of buyers just pulling themselves off the market has been the interest rates. And so if I take a look right now, this is something that we track on a daily basis. And again, just another reason why you want to connect with our team is that we track exactly what's happening every single day in the market. So if you look at my chart here, we track all these major points of data to give us a good indication of what's happening in the market. The interesting thing is just as of the other day, interest rates were at 7.6%, and they've been averaging well over 7% for about a month now. It's been a little while since we've seen an interest rate under 7%. But we're still selling houses. Take a look in this column right here, the number of sales in the last 30 days. We're still selling well over 2,000 homes every single month. And so that means that there are a lot of buyers still taking advantage of what's going on in the marketplace right now, even when interest rates are high. So if you're in that market right now, you're looking, you're thinking Jacksonville, but hey, maybe I'll just get there and rent for a year. All the people that came into Jacksonville at the beginning of January, they said, I'm going to wait because I hear that prices are going to go down. Prices are up almost 8% since the beginning of January, which means that that person in January, had they bought a house, they would have paid 8% less than what they're paying today. What do the next 12 months look like? I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. Interest rates are going to have to fall at some point because the economy is slowing down a little bit. We're seeing that the rate of inflation is coming down. And interest rates are directly tied to that rate of inflation. And so what you're going to see is that whether it's at the end of this year, as we get into first quarter of 2024, or as we get into home buying season, second quarter of 2024, as those interest rates come down, we already have a strain on the supply right now, meaning there just aren't enough houses that the buyers that are in the marketplace have to choose from. As interest rates come down, we're going to see more and more bidding wars as more buyers take themselves off the sidelines, taking advantage of lower rates. So if you're coming to Jacksonville, Take a look at what the inventory is. Take a look at what the rates are. The interesting thing is that Warren Buffett, a brilliant, brilliant investor, he says, be fearful when everyone is greedy and be greedy when everyone is fearful, which means that when everybody else is buying, you want to be selling. When everybody else is not buying, you want to buy yourself. Okay. So that being said, is that right now people have put themselves on the sidelines. Get yourself out there while everybody else is in this fearful mindset. And the great thing is you get to lock in your price on your house. And in just a second, we're going to go over why it's so important to lock in the value of your house or the price of your house as early as you possibly can and as low as you possibly can, because it's a direct reflection of what you're going to pay in your property taxes. All right, so just to wrap up this section, right now in Jacksonville, median home price right at $330,000. We are still setting records. We set a record in July for the median sale price. We came back down just a little bit, which is typical for this time of year. We do not have enough inventory to satisfy the demand, even though interest rates are still at 20, 25, 30-year highs. We haven't seen interest rates this high in a long time. People are still out there buying. So don't put yourself on the sideline. Get in town, take a look at some properties, find ones that you like, go ahead and lock in your price. And we have some great lenders that we work with. If you end up with an interest rate that you're not completely happy with, that's okay. We're going to be able to get you a free refinance later on down the road. Or if you decide, hey, I want to go that new construction route, we have great relationships with the builders, and we were able to negotiate 3 of our buyers last month at interest rates under 5%. So again, another reason why you guys want to give us a call, because we have those great relationships. We can tell you what promotions are out there. And if you're interest rate conscious right now, which a lot of people are, we can help solve that problem. All right, so let's take a look real quickly. We said in the last segment that it's important to lock in your price as quickly as you possibly can, as low as you possibly can. And the reason why is that your property taxes are a reflection of your sale price. Now, the great thing about Florida is that Florida has what we call a homestead exemption, which means that once you buy the property and they establish your tax base the very first time, if you homestead the property, which means that you're going to make it your primary residence, they lock in whatever your property tax rate is. It can only go up by 3% each year after that. So if I'm paying $1,000 in taxes this year, then next year, the most that I can pay is $1,030. I can only go up by 3%. And they use a quick formula and how they designate that. And what they do is they take the sale price of the property, let's say it's $100,000 sale price, and then they're going to multiply that usually by about 85%. So they're going to say about 85% of the value of the property. And they're going to say, okay, that's $85,000 of taxable value on a $100,000 purchase price. Now, if you qualify and you homestead your property, they take another $50,000 in value right off the top there before they set your tax rate. And in Jacksonville, the tax rate's about 17.3%, 17.4%, depending on the location, but it's right around 17%, which means that if for every $100,000 of taxable value that I have, I'm paying about $1,700. So you want to be able to keep knocking those things off to get those values down. So you get the 85% when you first purchase it, get your homestead exemption. That knocks another $50,000 off. And what's left, that's what you're going to be paying taxes on. So let's go back into my MLS, and I'm going to show you on that same property. So I'm going to go jump right back into MLS, and that same property that we fell in love with, we know that now, hey, I don't have to have flood insurance on this. Now, what do my property taxes look like? So what we do is we go in and we pull up the tax information on this particular property. And what you can look at and see here is that this has a market value of $535,000. And what they've done is they've assessed this at $535,000 as well. The taxable value is much lower. And part of the reason why it's lower is that when they bought the property, they were able to lock in their tax rate. And then they have exempt value of $163,000. So they got a $50,000 reduction plus a couple of other exemptions, which really lowers their tax base. And in this particular property, the millage rate is at 17.1%. So again, they're going off of this assessment and the taxable value. They're multiplying that out by the 17.1%. And we end up with $6,000 on a property that is very close to the beach. Now, if you took this same property, a $600,000, $700,000 property, and you put it in other states and you put the proximity that close to the beach, one, it would be $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million property, and the taxes would be outrageous on that. So, our property taxes, compared to some states, we are higher, right? So if you're coming from very rural areas of, Georgia or Alabama, Mississippi, maybe parts of Texas, the property taxes may not be that bad. But, when you're coming from other areas like New York, New Jersey, the Northeast, I've got a property in Vermont, and it's crazy the taxes that we pay on that. So hopefully if you guys are coming from those high tax areas, you'll come down here and see that, one, there's a huge advantage to me making sure that I get my homestead exemption in and get my property homestead exempted, because it is going to lower my tax base. But more so than anything else, it is locking in my tax base every year. And the most that I can go up is 3%. In other areas, if they do not have, other states, if they don't have that kind of homestead protection, or someone who comes to Florida and buys an investment property, whatever the market value of that property is, your taxes will reflect that. There are no protections from that standpoint. So again, if you're going to make this, you're moving to Florida, make sure you get in and you homestead that property as quickly as you possibly can. Do me a quick favor in the comments down below. Tell me the city and state that you're in right now, and then tell me how much you're paying for a gallon of gas and how much you're paying for a gallon of milk. Love for people to get a good comparison about where they are at now and potentially how that compares up to here in Jacksonville. All right, so now we know what we're going to be paying for a house. We kind of have an idea of what the property taxes are. What's another hidden cost? Well, hey, we've got a lot of newer homes, newer construction, newer areas, lots of subdivisions here in Jacksonville. And some of them are going to have HOA fees. Some of them are going to have HOA and CDD fees. And some of them are going to have no fees whatsoever. So you got to figure out, do I want to live in an association or do I not want to live in an association? I'm going to give you a couple quick pros and cons for that. If you like the fact that there is a board that is going to help keep the aesthetics of the neighborhood look good and up to speed and kind of provide a little bit of protection so people can't just do anything that they want with their house, you're going to want to be in an HOA. And if you don't want anyone telling you what to do with your house, you don't want anyone telling you have to have your lawn a certain length, it needs to be mowed on a certain day or a certain number of times a month, and how many days a week that you can have your car in the driveway or in the roadway. If you don't want any of those things, don't go and move into an HOA, because you will not change their policies regardless of how much you complain. So what I like about HOAs and CDDs is that it does provide some uniformity. It makes it real easy for me to compare my house and my house price to other people within the neighborhood, because again, we all are under the same limitations, the same guidelines. Why I like CDDs, and if you're not familiar with the CDD versus an HOA, a homeowners association is paid outside of your mortgage, and it's paid to a third party who is collecting it on a monthly basis. And there's typically an HOA board and an HOA community that gets together and they help make decisions. And that's elected, through the association itself. They'll send out something that says, hey, here are the board members, vote for them. But it's not a real formal process. But, you have an HOA board that is there to help make decisions, whether it's an architectural review board to approve any sort of updates that are going on. What I like about CDDs is that a CDD community is what they call a community development district, which means that I don't pay my HOA on a monthly basis to the association. Once a year, I'm paying it as part of my tax bill. I never realized how important it was that it's on the tax bill as opposed to a separate bill that is being paid out, Never realized how important that was until 2008, 2009, 2010. In Florida, we had tons and tons of foreclosures. The housing market had melted down. And what ended up happening was a lot of the people who stopped making their payments, they obviously stopped paying their homeowners association fees as well. Well, when homeowners association fees aren't receiving funds in, they can't keep up the amenities, whether it's the flower beds and the mowing, and if there's a pool and a fitness center. So what we saw was that those HOA communities were starting to struggle, right? They weren't taking in the fees, so they couldn't keep up their amenities. Now, how does that differ with the CDD? Well, with the CDD, because it's paid on the tax bill, if someone does not pay their property taxes, if they have a mortgage against the property, the bank is going to be paying the tax bill every year. And part of that tax bill is the CDD. So the CDD communities were not lacking the funds. So they were able to keep up those amenities. They had enough monies in their reserves and coming in from the banks to make sure that the amenities did not get left behind, that they didn't have to cut off or shut off amenities. So HOA versus CDD, I prefer a CDD, gives me a little bit more protection that the funds are always going to be available there. Typically, they are a little bit higher, but you also end up with more amenities and typically higher end amenities in a CDD community. Now, here's the thing. If you will never use any of those amenities, do not move into a CDD because you're not going to get your money back. Now, if you like the idea that your housing value can go up higher in a CDD community, hey, you know what? That's something to consider when you're making that move, but just don't get upset when you're paying that CDD fee going, hey, I'm paying a lot of money for these amenities that I'm not getting any use out of. If you're going to fight it like that, just stay out of the CDD communities, go to a low HOA community, and you'll be just as happy. Now, for that person who just wants to be rural, they want to be left alone, don't worry about the HOA and the CDDs. That's what we're going to look at, right? So let's jump back into the MLS and I'll show you exactly how we find out whether there are HOA, CDD, or no HOA fees. All right, so here's that house that we absolutely love, right? So now we're going to take a look at it. Usually in this top section of my MLS, it's going to tell me, is there an association fee? No, there is no association fee. Are there any CDD fees? No, there are no CDD fees. So to me, that is a great thing. I don't have to worry about paying any additional fees above and beyond my mortgage, my hazard insurance, and potentially flood. But in this particular case, I don't have to have flood. But again, we don't want people to be surprised. So if you're worried about being in an HOA, you're worried about being in a CDD, you don't want to pay those fees, or you want to limit how much you want to pay, again, one more reason why you want to call us, because we can set it up so that you're only seeing homes and we're finding you homes that have or eliminate those fees for you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about on the CDD fees or the HOA fees in our area, if you're in an HOA only, you're going to find that your HOA fees on an annual basis will be as low as, let's say, $100 a year. On the high end, it's probably going to go up to about $2,400 a year or $200 a month. When it comes to CDD fees, if you are in a CDD community, at a minimum, you're going to be paying about $1,000 a year for the CDD. Upwards of about $4,000 to $5,000 for the CDD, depending on which community you're in and how many amenities that they're offering. So those fees can vary community to community. Just if you've got questions on that, please make sure you ask us about them. Hey, if you're finding this video helpful, please do me a favor, click on that like button. That way other folks who are considering moving to Jacksonville, they'll have an opportunity to see this as well. So now we know how much we're going to be paying for a house. We got an idea of what the hazard insurance and flood insurance looks like. We've taken a look to figure out what our property taxes are going to be and whether we're going to have to pay an HOA or a CDD. Now I own the house. Now, how much am I going to be paying to kind of keep the house up? So in Jacksonville, we have one major electric provider, that is JEA. The great thing is that they do the water and They climate controlled, so that air conditioner is running all the time. Now, during those shoulder months, and when I say the shoulder months, so as we get into fall and we get into spring, I rarely have my air conditioner on, and I definitely don't have my heater on. So if we have it on, it's set at such a point where it has to get either really hot or really cold for it to turn on. So during those shoulder months, my electric bill may drop down to like $70, $75, $80 a month. So that's a great thing. When it comes to the water bill, same thing, okay? During those hot months, if you live in an HOA, they are going to require you to make sure that you're maintaining your lawn. Well, in order to maintain my lawn, I've got to run my sprinkler system. So starting March, April, May, June, all right, we're going to have heavier or a lot higher water bills. And that water bill may go up to $100, $125, $150 because about twice a week we're having to put some water on it. That's a little bit drier time for us. But as soon as July, August, September kick in, we're going to get those afternoon showers that are going to come on a regular basis so we can pull back. We don't have to water as much. So when we're not running the sprinklers and we're not having to maintain our lawn or maintain the water on our lawn, that water bill can go down to, $45, $50, $60 a month. Now, one little tip that what I love about Jacksonville and what JEA does is you can actually put a water meter or what they call an irrigation meter on your property. So some people like to go and put a separate well to actually water their yard with. The problem you run into with that is that the cost of putting in a well, you have to keep the house for a long period of time to get the payback. So you can actually put an irrigation meter on your property so that when you're running your sprinklers, so you're getting charged for the actual water usage, but you're just not getting charged for the water treatment and the sewage treatment part of that. Some tips to save you some money on water, electric is always look at the payback. If someone comes to you and says, hey, go to solar, do this to lower your bill, you got to look at it and go, all right, how long am I going to be owning this house? And for most of these bigger ticket items, whether somebody wants to put solar panels on, whether they want to put in a well, the payback period might be 14, 15, 20 years of savings before you actually collect it. And please don't let someone tell those solar panels are not paid off. If they are financed or leased, it creates a nightmare. So if you're thinking about going solar, pay cash for it, stay in the house for 20 years, get your payback. What we found for us is that our electric bills are not that bad during the winter months, and most of the fall and the spring, our heavy electric bills, they aren't bad enough that we feel like, gosh, I need to put out $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 to solve a problem that's only a couple months at a time. Budget for those months that are going to be a little bit heavier. Again, July, August, September, those are going to be your heavier months when it comes to air conditioning usage. When it comes to your heater, you're only going to be running it parts of January, parts of February, and it's not like you're running it all month. You're going to have some cold days. You're going to have some warm days. So you're going to be fluctuating with having the heater on, having the heater off. Again, I wouldn't make any big ticket items when it comes to trying to save money with solar or something like that. The only caveat that I would say to that is that if you can keep a house about 7 or 8 years, there is one solution that I prefer above all of those, and that's spray foam insulation. If the house is available for it, instead of having the regular insulation that they roll down or the stuff that they cut up and they sprinkle down, they can go in and do what they call spray foam insulation. It looks like an igloo. They'll go in and tighten that thing up. That drastically reduces your electric bills, at least 50% when we had it in our last house. The downside is that there is a cost associated with it, and it's about a 7 to 8 year payback before you'll actually, from the savings, before you'll actually realize that. You stay beyond there, now all of a sudden you're going to be saving quite a bit of money every single month. All right, so when it comes to cable, your cable and internet, what you're going to find, for me, I got away from cable altogether. So I pay about $90 a month for my internet. That's because I don't have a cable plan. Most of the cable that you have, you can get cable and internet as a bundled package. What I found what was cheaper for me was to just get internet, which is again about $80, $90 a month. And then I do one of the streaming services. I happen to use YouTube TV. Absolutely love it. Saves me a lot of money. The last time I had cable, my cable and internet bill was running me about $300 a month. Now I'm about 160, 170 with just cable and using YouTube TV, which I get all my local channels, plus all the stations that I actually watch. I'm a big sports fan, love the Jags. I can watch them. I can watch my local. I can watch my ESPN, all that good stuff. So if you do decide that, hey, I want cable and I want internet, be prepared. You're going to pay, somewhere between $200, maybe $300, depending on how many movie channels to bundle your cable and internet together. If you just want internet, you're probably going to be paying right at that $50 to $75 for basic internet. If you're just doing the broadband, you're going to be somewhere in that $50 to $70. If you're doing fiber optic, it gives you the faster uptime and downtime speeds or upload and download speeds. You're going to be paying closer to $75 to $100 for that. And again, your cable, you could get basic cable, 50, 60 bucks. Now all of a sudden you start adding the different packages to get everything that you want. You're going to be somewhere in that, $125 to $150 a month. Okay, when it comes to lawn maintenance, I've done it both ways. I've mowed myself. Okay, and that's what I do now. It doesn't cost me anything. All right. So I am the labor. I do it. I enjoy it. I get out there. It's a great way for me to get a little bit of exercise on the weekend that I normally wouldn't get. And I like it. I enjoy it. It's therapeutic. If you absolutely hate doing your yard, you can pay other people to do it. It's Florida. Starting in March, our grass is starting to grow, and it grows all the way through middle of October, maybe even early November. I remember this past Christmas, I actually cut my yard in the middle of December because it was warm enough that the grass kept growing. So I had to cut it one more time. I called it the Christmas cut. So we had to do that. It was fine. But if you want someone else to take over your yard, you're going to pay somewhere between $150 to $200 per month for someone to come and cut your yard. And this is what it's going to look like. During the summer months, they are going to be coming every single week. If not, you are going to have a jungle in your yard. So they are going to be coming on a weekly basis. During those shoulder months, during the spring and during the fall, they may come once every 10 days. The grass isn't growing as much, not as much for them to do, but they still have to maintain it. When it comes to the winter months, they're not going to be doing nearly as much. So you're going to be like, why am I paying for these people to do my yard and they're not doing anything? They may come once a month. Well, they spread that cost out over the month. So that way they don't charge you more during the summer when they're out there every single week. They make it as consistent as they can. So you've got a consistent payment, makes it easier for them to budget as well. And just during the winter time, they're going to be doing some blowing. They'll probably do a little bit of weeding, maybe some cutback of the hedges, but not a ton that's going to be done during the winter. But again, we only have about 10 days of winter here. So yeah, just kidding. Usually that January, February, not as much that's needed to be done on the yard itself. And then the last one, this is my favorite one. Okay. It's the pool service. Now, not every house in Florida has a pool. Some people come to us and they say, I want a house, and if it has a pool, I will not buy it. We have other people that says, I want a house. If it does not have a pool, I will not buy it. Now, for me, we've had 2 pools in our lifetime. We've had a lot of houses without pools. My preference now is I got to have a pool. It's great during the summer. It's a great way to cool off. It also is a way for you to, in an area that does not have a water feature, or if you're not on a lake, a pool provides a great landscape for you. When someone walks in your front door, they get to see the pool, they see a water feature that you're able to manufacture, and it creates this great aesthetic part of the house itself. Regardless of whether you're in the pool every single day or not, the aesthetics part of it is amazing. Resale value, it definitely helps with your resale value. So my thing is I don't want to have a green pool, and I don't want to have to figure out how much chemical or how much salt do I need to put in. You have chlorine pools, you have salt pools. I don't want to deal with any of that, so I pay someone to do it. You're going to pay somewhere between $125 to $200 a month for someone to come and treat your pool and make sure that it's not green. Green pools are not good. They don't look good. They don't smell good. Things grow in them. You don't want that. I want a crystal clean blue pool all year round. And if it's up to me to do it myself, it's going to be green more times than it's going to be blue. So I hire the experts. I pay $150, $160 a month, and they're there every single week, regardless of the weather, which means when it's cold and they're doing their work, I don't have to be outside doing it with them, right? So they're taking care of that during those cold months. The last thing you want to be doing is out there trying to figure out what's going on with your pool. And again, it's not like we have crazy cold weather, but you do have to maintain the pool during the winter months here. We don't shut our pools down. They're running year round. So those are those monthly expenses that you're going to have to deal with. You know, what does it cost for my cable, my internet, my water, my electric, pool service, lawn service? The last one you can look at is, you know, we do have pests here and we have pest control service. It's going to run you between $30 to $50 a month. They're going to spray the perimeter of the house, the perimeter of the yard. That just keeps all the critters, all the bugs from getting in the house and walking around. They kill them, you know, usually before they ever get there. So spend the money, $30 to $50 a month on that pest control service, and you'll be happy you spent that money. All right, so I told you if you stuck with us to the end, we were going to actually take you over to the grocery store and to the gas station to see what are those daily expenses. You know, how much is it going to cost me to put in gas? How much am I going to pay at the grocery store? Now, I didn't do a deep dive. Everybody's got a little bit different palette, but for the most part, we tried to go take a look at the staples. All right, the first thing we would want to look at is look at our gas prices. Right now at $3.40 is what we're paying on average. And that's for 87 octane. I'm sorry, I'm cheap. I put the cheap stuff in my car. If it ruins my car, that's going to be 10 years from now. I'm probably not going to have the car that long. I'm going 87. I'm filling up as cheap as I can. Now, I go over to the gate station. That's one of the most convenient places to me. If you want to save a little bit more off of that, normally we'll find that whether at the big box stores, whether it's at Walmart or Costco or BJ's, you know, the bigger stores, you might save about 10, 12 cents a gallon. But right now, on average, you're going to pay about $3.40 a gallon for gas. And I looked at that, how that compared to some of the other areas outside of Florida and some of those higher gas states. On average, those higher gas states at right at $5.40 a gallon. I saw California the other day at almost $7 a gallon, which is absolutely crazy. So we're not the lowest. We're not the most expensive. Pretty affordable for the most part. Love to see that gas price, you know, well into the twos, $2.50, you know, getting lower to $2. When that's going to happen, who knows? But, you know, $3.40, it's not ideal, but it ain't $7 a gallon. All right, now let's run over, take a look in Publix. And I just went over to the dairy aisle, took a look at a couple different types of milk. Whole milk, you're going to pay about $4.59 a gallon. If you're someone who likes almond milk or some sort of alternate milk, you can see what you're paying for that. It's not that much more to get almond milk. So if you want to get away from the dairy, get away from the lactose, that's what you've got right there. All right, you want to pick up a loaf of bread? It's about $4.29. Pick up some lunch meat, you know, make some sandwiches. You're going to save money bringing those lunches as opposed to going out to eat, because it is absolutely crazy going out to eat right now. I don't care what part of the country you're in. You're going to be spending on average about $15 per person to go out and get a meal. You can make your own meal for about $3. So cost of bread, $4.29. You need to pick up a dozen eggs. 6 months ago, egg prices were absolutely ridiculous. They have come back down. Cost of eggs right now, $2.25 for a dozen. All right, so we want to pick up some hamburger. We want to make some hamburgers, or most of what I grew up eating had some sort of hamburger base. So, you know, I like the hamburger. You're going to pay on the low end about $4 a pound, up to about $8, depending on what kind of ground beef you want to use. If you want the lean, you want organic, you want the grass-fed, all that good stuff. And we went over to Publix, which Publix is our shopping store that is not the most expensive. It's not the least expensive, but it's probably the most convenient for most people around Jacksonville. They're going to have a Publix very close to them. So we wanted to try to give pricing based on where people were at and what they were going to see the most. Like I say, there are other stores around town that are a lot less expensive, but Publix is that kind of good medium ground that you're going to find a little bit of everything that you're looking for. All right, so depending on whether you want bone-in chicken, you want to do chicken breast, certified green wise, whatever you want to call it, $1.69 a pound, up to about $6 a pound for chicken. When it comes to steak, I do like my steak. I'm not going to lie. I like my ribeye. Ribeye is pricing out somewhere around $15 to $16 a pound right now. Other cuts of steak are going to run anywhere from $9 to about $20 a pound. Again, a little bit pricier than what we'd like to see right now, but that's what we're stuck with. So if you want the steak, $9 to about $20 a pound. All right, so you got the food, you got the gas. The great thing about Jacksonville, not as lot, you don't have to pay a lot to park. Most areas that you go to, unless you go down to the beach, there are some parking areas that you'll have to pay, $1, $2 to park. If you go to downtown Jacksonville, you might be paying, anywhere from $5 to $10 to park for an extended period of time. Parking garage is going to be $15, $20 for the day. If you go to any of the sporting events, it's going to be about $20 to park for the sporting event, maybe $25 if you're really close to the event in the stadium. But parking is not that bad, mostly free parking anywhere that you go. You're not going to have to worry about, not like the big cities where everywhere you turn around, there's a parking meter asking you to throw your credit card in or throwing a whole bunch of coins in. We just don't have that here. And finally, tolls. All right, so we do have some toll roads. They're starting to pop up here. Now, you have an option. You can go on what we call the express toll road, where you'll pay anywhere from 50 cents to about $1 to jump on the express side of the toll and bypass a lot of the traffic that is going on in and around the Jacksonville area. 99% of the roadways, there are no tolls, so it is very affordable. If you don't have the money in your budget to pay tolls, you can drive everywhere you want without having to pay a single toll. And so those are those daily expenses that you're going to run out to. I'm sure there are plenty of other ones that you're asking about. Well, what about this? What about this? If I didn't answer something, you want an idea of what that cost is, again, put a comment down below. Love to be able to answer that question for you. But again, if you don't have that question, I do want you to do me a favor and answer the one that we asked a little bit earlier. Where you're at right now, how much are you paying for gas and how much are you paying for a gallon of milk? Love to get your comments right down below. So now that you know all about Jacksonville, what the cost of living is like here, if you have not watched it yet, what I want you to do is go watch our pros and cons of Jacksonville, Florida. What's it like? Why are people living here? So take a look at that. That'll be the next video you watch. Chris Snow here with the Florida Coastal team. God bless, and we'll see you on our next video.